So I've opened up the Chapter 1 study guide, and if you're working on the textbook, wrap up what you're doing and join us on the study guide. Like if you're still filling out the form, great, but then get caught up with us, we're in the study guide. So what I've done is I've given you a little bit of their study guide at the end of our textbook chapter. We've covered all the material in the chapter. Don't worry about if you don't have the textbook because I've given you everything you need without the textbook for this unit. But I did grab the study guide for you so you can look over the concepts. Over on the side here, all the way down to the last page, I have 20 things for you to look at. Some of which are like essay questions. Look at the directions right here. This isn't homework, but the goal is to be able to verbally give the answer. So if you have a study partner, they can say, all right, what's the goal of science? And then you go, I forgot that one. And then you would write out the answer for yourself so you have like the answer key. I'm not going to provide an answer key for you because going for recall is not a good way of studying. Like if you had the answers here and you would scan it, but you didn't invest any energy into the thought of what the answer is. And so when you scan stuff, it's in your short-term memory for a little bit, you walk out the door, and it's erased. So if you put pencil to paper or your iPad, it engages your brain and the neurons connect up and you remember things. It goes into your longer term memory. Keep it simple. Don't necessarily look for what it says over here and then copy that. If you put it in your own words, again, more connections in your brain happen and it goes into your long-term memory. Copy and paste, short-term memory. So the goal of science is what? Do you remember from a few weeks back? It was such a simple definition that it's easy to remember or easy to forget because it's so simple. It's the obvious. Anybody want to give a crack at what science is? Yeah?
To help understand the behavior of things like, I don't know, living organisms.
All right. It's a way of understanding, you said behavior and things. So you're almost there. It's a way of understanding the
Study of life.
That's part of it. Remember, this is science, so life is biology. That's one subset of science. So you're not wrong. But a more global, bigger picture, again.
The physical and natural structure of the world.
There you go. You said the world. So it's a way of understanding the world. And the way or the process is the scientific method. And the reason why we say the world is because we do that with our 5 senses, right? We went over that. That's the only way that you can observe things, by hearing it, seeing it, smelling it, tasting it, touching it. And so that's what science is. You see something. How about the awesome thunderstorm? I grew up in the Midwest, and that happens every week. But here in California, only every few years. And over my city, it got to the point where it was almost lightning and thunder at the same time. It takes 7 seconds per mile. You see the light, and then if you count 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, 4, 1,000, 5, 7 seconds is 1 mile away. It takes sound a lot longer to travel than light. The fastest thing is the speed of light. So when you hear that, you're like, whoa, what's causing that noise? That's an observation, right? That you heard and saw. And then you go, well, what could make that noise? What's a lightning bolt? Then you could start testing it. So science starts with observations. That's a test question. Okay, number 2, biology and study of life is from large objects to small objects. There's a hierarchy of organization of life from the biosphere to the molecules. So we didn't really cover that, but it's somewhat obvious and it's right here in the study guide. life's hierarchy of organization. The biosphere is the entire world. If we were an alien approaching the Earth, we would see the whole Earth, and that is the biosphere. Inside of our atmosphere, life happens. In the vacuum of space, life can't happen as far as we know it right now. So you get closer to the surface and you end up into an ecosystem. Maybe you land near the equator. That's the tropic ecosystem. Maybe you land near the poles. That's the polar region. So it's a huge geographic region on the Earth. And as you continue to get closer to the ground, then you start, let's say you land here in Orange County. We would be a community of Orange County. Many different trees, many different types of animals. That's a community. It's when you have a bunch of things living together, and it's like the food web. Zoom in even closer, and you end up seeing a population. Now you're only looking at the trees that are in the area. So you have a population of trees, you have a population of mice, you have a population of geese, right? Every species is going to be together, and we saw in the video, the caribou, when they were migrating, they were all one community. It's not usual where everybody gets together all at once and they're nowhere else. Zoom in closer, and then you could find an individual organism. That's one of the species, and like the wolves, we're targeting the newly born caribou. So organisms are individuals. Zoom in on that individual, and now you could study what they're made of. They're made up of different organ systems. So our circulatory system is an organ system. It's got our lungs, it's got our blood vessels, and so on. So it could be a collection of other organs. So an organ system like our digestive tract is our mouth and our salivary glands, it's our esophagus, it's our stomach, it's our small intestine, large intestine, colon, and all of the glands that are putting digestive juices in there. But then if we go into it, then we can say, all right, now let's take a look at just the stomach. And then, hey, what's the stomach made up of? Well, it's made up of different tissues. It's got muscles. It's got the lining of the inside of your stomach. Then you could look at individual cells of the tissue. Then you could dive down into the cell and see individual organisms. Not organisms, organelles, like the mitochondria, like the nucleus. And if you zoom in even closer, you can see the molecules that these are made up of. I had a student who's now a senior. At the end of yesterday, he walked in and we talked for a while. He was a really good student. And I see him around campus for years. And he's standing by the door. He goes, oh yeah, I remember that poster over there. So those are individual molecules that make up our cellular membrane. And it's how our cells control what goes in and out. And he goes, I remember us doing robots with that. So we're going to go to the library, and you're going to use the little Sphero robots. You're going to program them, and they're going to be going through active transport or passive transport. And you're going to program it with some other robots, and that's kind of a funny. I said, did you like that? He said, yeah, that was really cool. So you got the hierarchy. Can you keep that in order? There's, I think, 2 questions on the test about the hierarchy. Number 3. I was thinking of doing this, putting a blank piece of paper in front of you and said, all right, now write down the steps of scientific method. That's question number 3. You have a study partner. It could even be a parent, somebody at home. You could say, all right, ask me these questions. Any question. I got it. I want to see if you can stump me. I want to see if I'm ready for the test. So, all right, what are the steps of scientific method? Let's see, hypothesis. No, that's not right. Question, hypothesis. No, that's not right. Observation, question, hypothesis, procedure. Right? So you might catch yourself. If they go, nope, that's not it. Almost. So if you're an athlete, and you're going to be basketball. I remember the Lakers have been great since like the 80s. Shaquille O'Neal, remember him? Now he's just on commercials. The guy's huge. If that guy was underneath the basket, he could just like elbow anybody out. But put him on the free throw line, he was only shooting like 4 out of 10. So it was called Hack-a-Shack. All you had to do was follow him, put him on the free throw line, and he would miss, and then you get the ball back. So as good as he was, blocking people out, and he could almost go like this and just dunk the ball without jumping. But so he had a weakness. And Kobe Bryant said, all right, dude, you have to practice this. So he made him like shoot free throw after free throw. He got a little bit better, got up to about 60%. So if you are taking that analogy, if you're not good at taking tests, you're probably just testing for recall instead of understanding things so that you could explain it. Treat every test like it's an essay test and you will do great. Your goal is to get at least a B average on your quizzes. And if you come out of the gate with a C, then realize, oh, I better do something different. Otherwise, I'll keep getting C's and C's. Then it's hard to get an A in this class. If you get an A in all your labs, all your homework, you can even get a C on your tests now and then and still get an A. But you want to try to get the best grade on tests as possible, or quizzes. So make sure you can name the scientific method in order. Question 4. You know the difference between the variables in an experiment? We went over that for several days, so you should know what the independent variable is, the dependent variable, and controls. What is the one that you choose to test? Like if you want to test that fertilizer is the best fertilizer for plant growth, would fertilizer be the independent variable or dependent variable? Which one? Correct. Independent variable is the name of the variable that you choose independent of anybody else telling you what to do, and that is the one that you're going to vary. I'll do fertilizer A, B, and C. Remember that one graphing exercise with pot A, pot B, pot C? The 3 containers of plants were different in their density. In one pot they had 1 plant, the other one 2 plants, and then 3 plants. So in that experiment, the independent variable was the number of plants in one container. The dependent variable is what you measure, the height of the plant. The number of drops to equal 1 milliliter. What you are counting is the dependent variable. And a control is, if we're manipulating pot A, B, and C, then we should have a control, like pot A was the control with 1 plant. Then let's see if we start crowding it. Sometimes they do better if they're crowded together. Sometimes they do better if they're by themselves. So if you look at a plant, it says plant them 1 inch apart, plant them 3 inches apart. So they know that because they've done testing on it. What's the purpose of an experimental hypothesis? Number 5. Want to go just from question over to procedure? Think about it while I close the door. Ava, what's a hypothesis?
Hypothesis is like basically like a way of like what you think your experiment is going to be. It's like if and then your independent variable, then dependent variable, at least what you think the outcome will be, and then why you believe it's true.
So it gets you thinking about how you're going to design your experiment. If there's no way to get to the procedure unless you say, you know what, if I do this, then I think the answer is going to be this. So you have to design an experiment. It turns out that when you design an experiment, you have to make your experiment testable. It sounds obvious, but if you can't run any tests to prove that it is one way or the other, then you don't have an experiment. So the way that they say it is an experiment has to be testable, and get this, falsifiable. You have to be able to prove it. The only thing you can do is prove it false. Think about the Mythbusters. All they could do is bust a myth. They could never say, hey, this myth is true. They would always say, it's plausible. It might happen. Possible. We think that it's highly probable. We think it's really way out there. Probably not. But they'll never say it's true. So you cannot prove an experiment to be true. If it looks like your data is supporting your evidence, I said that wrong. If it looks like your data is supporting your hypothesis, now you are onto a theory. But it doesn't mean that it's true. It just means that we haven't tested it enough to break it. So you keep running more and more tests to see if you can make it false. And if you can't, you're probably onto something like a theory, a well-tested hypothesis. So the purpose of an experimental hypothesis is you design your best idea of checking the answer to the question of the lab. And you have to be able to test it, and you're going to try to make it false. And if not, then you just say, hey, you know what? I think I'm onto something. It looks like this is supported by the evidence. Keep doing that year and year, experiment after experiment, and now you have a theory, a well-tested hypothesis. So I answered question 6 too. You have to set up your test so it can be false. It needs to be testable and falsifiable. You can never prove something to be true. Think about it. We may have really bad technology right now, as cool as we think it is, but your kids, they may have something that just blows our technology out of the water. And they'll be able to test things in a way that we could never even think about, and they will show that it's false. Right now we might think it's a theory, but only infinite number of testing can prove that something is true, and we can never get there. That was question 7. Is an experiment linear? Does it always go hypothesis, procedure, test? Yeah?
I don't think that.
No. You don't have to get to the very end. You might not even realize, I set this up so bad. I'm not even getting data out of my experiment. So then before you even get to the back half of your experiment, you go back to the drawing board. So you might even pick up someone's data, and then you can design a new experiment, skip a few steps. That's the general order, and going from start to finish, you'll always cover it all, but sometimes it bisects and takes you in different directions. Question? Okay. Alrighty. Let's see where we're at. This page 2? I'm in a viewer, so I'm not able to move around very well. Have you heard of the 5 kingdoms of life? Maybe you covered it starting in like 3rd grade. I'll get you started. The animal kingdom. What do we call non-animals? The plant kingdom. What do we call single-celled organisms? That's a little harder, right? We call them protists. So that's a kingdom. but it's also made up of multiple kingdoms, but really we call it protist kingdom. Now you're on to where I'm getting at, right, with these pictures. Bacteria are their own kingdom because they're not like other things. And then fungus. You might thought those were plants, but they don't go through photosynthesis. They pop up out of the ground. They suck up dead and decaying nutrients in the ground. And their cellular structure is different than plants and animals. So they're in their own large grouping of organisms, which is what a kingdom is. So there's 5 kingdoms. And these are bacteria right here, and then the others. But then, starting about 1980, they made a discovery at the bottom of the ocean. It took a while for technology to catch up to our exploration of the depths. They say discovering what's at the bottom of the ocean is harder than going in space. Extreme pressures. So much so that on every square inch of your body, it is the weight of a semi-truck, a huge 18-wheeler, pushing down on every square inch. So you have to have a submarine that has walls like this thick, is perfectly round, and it can go down like, the average depth of the ocean is 3 miles, but it can reach depths of 7 miles down. You know how hard how bad your ears hurt when you dive down 10 feet into the ocean? Or at the bottom of a swimming pool? Like, my ears. That water is extremely heavy. And it doesn't take long for our bodies to suffer from that pressure. We're used to 1 atmosphere of pressure. All the air from right here, we're nearly at sea level. Maybe we're at 100 feet above sea level. And my wife just traveled to Denver today, and she's at 5,000 feet, and she's on the ground. So I said, "Oh, you're still a mile above me," and she landed. So that's why they call Denver a mile-high city. It's tough for athletes to go and compete there because the air is really thin. So here at our sea level, we have more air over us, and air has weight. It's like 7 pounds of air on us right now. So the higher up you go in the mountain, the less air, the less weight. And our body responds to that. So what I was saying is these guys at the very depths of the ocean weren't discovered except for like 40 years ago. So now it blew away our thought of 5 kingdoms, and they go, you know what? I think we need a new system. So when you read this, there is still some disparity in the way scientists view this, but now generally there are 3 larger groups than kingdoms. They're called domains. This is on the test. 3 domains of life. These guys, most of life on the planet is in this domain right here. Got a weird name to it. It's called eukarya. You may have heard of it as eukaryotic. That means our cells are built the same way. We have the same cell membrane structure. We have the same organelles inside, and it goes through most of the same process. That is a true nucleated cell. But these guys, even bacteria are different from each other. The normal bacteria are in the domain bacteria because we understand them, and they're more with us as far as where we live. Domain archaea are archaic. So think back to the primordial soup days of the earth, and this is probably all that was there. They're extreme bacteria. They can live at the depths of the ocean. They can live in frozen ice. They can live in acid lakes like Yellowstone. They can live at the bottom of the ocean where hydrothermal vents are spewing out 700 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. There's a thriving ecosystem built on these guys, taking all of the chemicals coming out of these black smokers, and they, like the sun, create glucose from that. So it's a whole new, it's like finding life on another planet. So now when we look for life on another planet, we look for all of these and the cellular remains, but we're looking for strange new ways of life being, and that's arcade. All right, spent quite a bit of time on that because we hadn't talked about it before. So I think we sort of talked about questions 11 through 14. You should be able to verbalize that too, so read that information up there. That's from our textbook. And I'm having trouble with this viewer. I didn't open it up in Notability. Went to a white screen. Looks like I have to open it up again or something, but how are we doing on time? All right, look over while I correct myself, get back to where you are. I'm going to have you look over the next section, and then I'm going to call on you to answer the question instead of me just giving you the information. So this is how you would model preparing yourself for a quiz. Look over the information that I have in the study guide, be able to answer the question. So what did we get to, the number 11, or was it 15? We got to 15? So now check out 16, 17, and 18. And I'll be with you within 5 minutes. This is fresh in your mind. It was part of our density lab that we just did, and the number of drops, especially the metric measurement lab. I have graded all of your assignments that have been turned in. I even graded the early birds who turned in their metric measurement lab, so you could check out the grade comments that I have there. In some cases, there were some pretty big errors that you can correct before the due date. The due date on that is Sunday, so it's not due yet. So what I cover here can help you with your lab write-up if you're still working on it. Ani, what are the 3 base units? Question 15.
I don't even know what that means.
The basic unit of the metric system. How do we measure how heavy something is in the metric system?
Like grams.
Correct? Grams. How do we measure volume?
Liters.
Right? And how about distances?
Meters.
Those are the 3 base units. Okay? Do you see it right there in the middle of the screen? These are the base units. So they equal 1. There were like 20 conversion questions in your metric system lab, and it seemed like only 10% got all of them right. So it takes a little practice on using this and memorizing the prefixes. So what are the 6 prefixes? Nabila? What are the 6 prefixes?
Oh, milliliters, centimeters, decimeters, decameters, kilometers, and hectoliters.
Right. And you almost said it in order. You got the last 2 mixed up. So be able to say them in the correct order. That's why we have this acronym. King Henry doesn't usually drink chocolate milk. So the first letter stands for that unit. It's a little misleading because there's both a deca and a deci. They both mean 10, like a decade. All the small units end in I. That's easy to remember because milli and centi are really small. And so that's your clue that anything ending in I is a very small unit. There are more units than this. It really extends far out this way, and it even goes far out that way. But these are the 6 that we're going to use because it's kind of what you can deal with our instruments. So it's a step. It's called a ladder. So it's a good visual in your mind to know where they are in the correct order. And then let's say that the question is, if you have 1 meter, how many millimeters do you have? 1 meter equals how many millimeters? You put your finger on where you're starting, finger on where you're ending, and how many separations? 1, 2, 3. Move the decimal place 3 places to the right. If you're starting and ending toward the right, you move the decimal place to the right. If you're starting and ending to the left, you're moving the decimal place to the left. That's about all you have to remember. Then how many steps are we going down? So if you are going from kilometers down to millimeters, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 places to the right. You had one lab write-up question that said, if you had 25 drops for every milliliter, how many drops would it take to fill up a liter? And some people didn't put it through their doesn't make sense filter in your head. And they said, well, if it took 25 drops to fill in a millimeter, then blah, 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 they did calculate. Then it's going to take a third of, it's going to take 0.03 liters. And then I'm like, what? That doesn't make sense. You know what a liter container is. It's about that big right there. That's a liter, approximately. It's big. You can get a 2-liter thing of soda, right? It's this big. So how many difference is it from your millimeter to a liter? That's 1, 2, 3 steps. Every step is times 10. 10 times 10 times 10. That's 1,000 difference. If it took 25 drops to fill 1 milliliter, now it's 1,000 times more. It's 25,000 drops to fill in a liter container. So know how to use the metric system, know the base units, the prefixes, how to convert, number 17. How will you ensure that you will earn the highest grade possible on a quiz? What was the advice that I gave you at the very top of this page? Basically, I said, walk up to the free throw line and shoot 100 baskets. So if you want to get good at taking tests, practice the test not just 1 time, but 2 times and 3 times. The first time through, if I asked you to do this with no help from pictures, you probably would have got 30% right. Study it a little bit, do it again, have someone drill and practice you, or drill and practice yourself by not looking at the answers and writing out the question. Writing out the answer, I mean. So that's the second time. Then maybe you're going to get 75%. Do it again, now you're at 100%. So you have to be like an athlete. You have to be a academic athlete, and you have to practice it. Number 16, don't be surprised if you get a C or a D on a test if you walk into a test and never have practiced it. So there are practice questions in our textbook, which are helpful. You don't really need it for this one because I gave you this, which is good. But here's some help that you can do. I did build a Kahoot challenge for you for the metric system, the scientific method, and the characteristics of life. It's limited to 100 students, so when it ends up being full, I have to recreate it. It's a limitation to a free Kahoot account. Have a study partner, just as I mentioned, and come to office hour, and that's kind of like a study partner time. So we have a office hour on Monday that you can come in. I will try to keep out the people that are just socializing, so it could be a meaningful office hour. And so it shouldn't be as loud as it was than the last time. Yeah? No, we're almost done, right? Well, we have 10 minutes, so if it's an emergency, you can. So if you can't wait 10 minutes, feel free to go. I'm not going to say no. So we're going to go over here to Canvas and take a look at the Kahoot challenges. Was there a picture there for the 7 characteristics of life? Did I put that back in? Was it in the study guide that I just gave you?
This one?
Yeah, there it is. So I skipped over it. I skipped over question. I kind of skipped over question 10. So we went over this too with our video. So you should be able to list these out. Sure, you can recognize them, but if you can actually list it, you're at the free throw line and you're knowing, out of 7 shots, I missed 2 of them. If you just look at it and go, okay, I'll be able to, yeah, I got that. Yeah. Never mind, I got that. And then you never practiced it. Yeah, I can throw free throws. Okay, so they're obvious, right? Grow and develop, reproduce, respond to the environment like a drought. Also, same example, you have to keep an internal balance. That's called regulation. So you have to regulate your water, your salts, and everything. This was an interesting one that people are like, what's a highly ordered structure? Well, it's specialization. It's wings for flying, it's teeth for being a great carnivore, it's speed to get away from the predator. So it's their adaptation. And then if you are not all animals move. They're stuck in one spot like a plant. So moving is not a characteristic of life, but they're obtaining energy in some fashion, and then using it is a sign of life. So that's the middle one right here, energy processing. So they can actually see how they eat or how they make their own food. And then the last one over here is, if you watch an organism closely, you'll see that they change. There's one question that I don't think I put on the test. It said, what if a medicine kills 99.9% of bacteria? Will the next generation of bacteria be the same, where they're killed 99.9%? No, you killed off all the ones that were killed by the medicine. You only left the ones that, for some reason, like this big bushy tail, the medicine didn't kill them. Their DNA doesn't allow it. So now, the next generation, the medicine is only like 50% effective. And then the next generation after that, 25% effective. So isn't that sort of what we're seeing with the COVID Delta variant? Maybe we have kind of eradicated all the other variants, and now these were the oddballs that now are not being affected by the current vaccines, and so they proliferate. They have more offspring. Their genes are passed on. That's evolution. Evolution happens really fast at the bacteria and viral level, and real slow with long-lived animals. So there is evolutionary adaptation that you can see with organisms. All of these right here are also themes of biology, so we will come back to these and studying them in more detail. So chapter 1, if you're looking at the textbook, goes over themes of biology, but it's really the characteristics of living things. So where can you find the Kahoots? Have you noticed over at our textbook? There it is. Under modules, we have class notes. So I put them under class notes right here. You have time to do one of these, so take your pick, run through it. Characteristics of living things. It's an individual Kahoot. So you can type your name. If you wanted to do this again, you'll have to type a different version of your name. And what's cool about the quiz is that it really is like you are playing your peers at the same time. So it's kind of grading you against others. The grade doesn't matter. So don't worry about that. Living things share common characteristics. Which of these is one of them? They grow and develop. The faster you answer it, and you have to be correct too, then you earn more points, and that's your score. So you've got a lot of tools here to practice and do well on the quiz. So take the last 6 minutes.